Every call I ever made when something went wrong started the same way. Mom, that was it. One word, and she always picked up, always. 47 years of picking up, no matter the hour, no matter where she was, no matter how big or small the thing was. That's not something you forget. That's something you carry with you until it becomes the reason you move, when you need to move. My mother, Edith Landry, was not a woman who asked for help. She had been a librarian for 35 years at the same branch in Greenwood, Indiana, and she had the quiet, unshakable steadiness of someone who had spent her entire working life being the person others came to when they needed something. She knew where everything was. She remembered everyone. When my father passed 9 years ago, a Sunday in October that permanently changed the color of that month for me, she grieved the way she did everything else, thoroughly, privately, and without falling apart in front of anyone who needed her to hold it together. She sold his second car to cover the funeral costs without telling me until the check had already cleared. She kept the house on Sycamore Lane running exactly as she always had. She still had Sunday dinner ready for whoever showed up, every single week for 9 years running, without skipping once. She never called me to say she couldn't manage. Not once. So understand what it meant when I picked up my phone at 7:43 on a Thursday morning and heard her voice come out thin and strange, like something essential had been pressed out of it. "Curtis," she said. That was all. One word in that one voice, and I already knew. "Mom, you okay?" "I don't want to make a big deal out of it." She paused, and in that pause I heard her trying to shrink something that should not be shrunk. "I fell in the bathroom. I've been on the floor for a little while. I think I may have done something to my hip." I stood completely still in my kitchen for 3 seconds. My truck, a 2021 Ram 1500, was sitting at Brannigan's Auto on Madison Avenue. Transmission issue. They'd called Tuesday. Wouldn't be ready until Friday at the earliest. Think. My wife worked from home, had for 3 years. Her Jeep Grand Cherokee was in the driveway, full tank. She had a virtual showing at 10 o'clock. I knew because she'd mentioned it at dinner the night before, twice, and again that morning when she'd gotten up before me to make sure everything was set up the way she wanted it. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Wanda. I could hear her on a call in her office. Wanda. "Hold on just a second," she said to whoever was on the other end. Then flatter, "What, Curtis?" "I need to borrow the Jeep. My mom fell. She's on the bathroom floor, her hip." A pause. "How long has she been down there?" "I don't know." "A while. She didn't want to call me." She let out a breath. The specific kind that precedes something the person already knows they shouldn't say. "Curtis, I have a showing in 2 hours. The Hendersons. They've been dragging their feet on this listing for 3 weeks, and if I lose them today because she might have broken her hip. She's gotten up from falls before." Another murmur into the phone. "I'm so sorry, just one moment." I stood at the bottom of those stairs and waited. She appeared at the top 30 seconds later, phone pressed against her chest, reading glasses still on, robe tied at the waist, face completely composed in the way people compose their faces when they have already made a decision and are only deciding how to phrase it. "Curtis." Her voice was patient in the way that patience is sometimes a form of dismissal. "She's 78. Falls are part of this. That's what ambulances are for. Call one." "She doesn't like ambulances. She had a bad experience when Dad..." "Then call one of her neighbors. She knows everyone on that street." "Wanda." She held up one hand. "Not my problem, okay? I cannot lose the Hendersons over this. She's your mother. You figure it out." She went back to the phone. The office door clicked shut. Not with a slam, with a soft final click that meant the conversation was over before I had fully understood it had started. She had said the words "not my problem" and walked back to her desk, and my mother was on a bathroom floor in Greenwood, 35 minutes away, holding still and waiting and trying not to be a bother. I stood there for a moment, just a moment, then I pulled out my phone. Sherman Cole had lived 4 houses down from me for 11 years, retired Indianapolis Fire Department, engine company on the east side, 31 years of service, 74 years old. He drove a 10-year-old Silverado that was cleaner than most new cars off the lot, and he had never, in the 11 years I had known him, been late to a single thing. He and my father had known each other. He had been at the funeral. He'd brought a casserole dish big enough to feed 6 and hadn't said a word about it. He picked up on the second ring. "Kurt, what's up?" Not a question. That was just how Sherman talked, level and already moving toward ready. "My mom fell at her house in Greenwood, her hip. My truck is at the shop and I can't get Wanda's car. Can you drive me out there and get her to St. Vincent's?" Not even the suggestion of a pause. "I'll have the truck running. Meet me at the curb." That was it? No conditions, no checking a calendar, no asking me to explain further? I called my mother back immediately. Mom, I'm coming. Sherman's driving. All you have to do is stay completely still. Do not try to get up. Do you hear me? Oh, Curtis. Her voice was the thinnest I had ever heard it in 58 years. I really didn't want to cause trouble. You're not causing any trouble. Stay put. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Okay, baby. Sherman was already backed out of his garage by the time I got outside. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer commentary, just drove 35 minutes to Greenwood. I watched the interstate go past and felt two things sitting in my chest at the same time, pressed up close against each other. Relief because I was moving, because Sherman had answered without pause, because my mother was still talking, and that meant she was conscious and coherent. And something else that didn't have a clean name yet. Something cold and flat and patient. I let it sit there and didn't examine it. I had time for that later. We got to Sycamore Lane at 8:32. My mother's house was a small white Cape Cod with blue shutters. My father had painted himself the summer I turned 12. The front walk was swept clean. The welcome mat had said, "Bless this home," in faded letters for as long as I could remember, and neither of us ever noticed it anymore. I noticed it that morning. I had a key. I always had a key. She was on the bathroom floor exactly where she'd said. Small and pale against the white tile, still in her nightgown, one hand braced against the cabinet under the sink to keep herself propped up. Her reading glasses were on the floor beside her where they'd fallen. She was still holding her library book in her other hand, like she'd been waiting to get back to it. That nearly put me on the floor myself. Mom? She looked up at me and immediately said, "I'm sorry you had to come all this way." "Don't," I said. "Don't you say sorry to me." Sherman stood in the bathroom doorway and didn't say a single word. He just looked at her the way a man looks at someone he's relieved to find still breathing, and gave one slow nod. We got her to St. Vincent's by 9:15. The intake nurse, a steady woman named Felicia, who had the specific efficiency of someone who had seen everything twice and stopped flinching about it years ago, had my mother in a room within 20 minutes. The orthopedic on call was Dr. Andrew Finley, calm voice, unhurried hands, the kind of doctor who explained every step before he took it and looked at the patient when he talked instead of the clipboard. "Mrs. Landry," he said, "what you're describing is very consistent with a femoral neck fracture. I want imaging right now to confirm." My mother looked at me. She had the expression of a woman who already knew the answer and was waiting patiently for the room to catch up. "Do what he says, Mom," I told her. She patted my hand. "You always were sensible." The imaging confirmed it. Clean fracture of the left femoral neck, surgery scheduled for the following morning, partial hip replacement, recovery measured in months, not weeks. She would not be going back to Sycamore Lane alone, not anytime soon. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours and 18 minutes, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, a television in the corner running the midday news on mute, the worst coffee I have ever tasted in my life, from a machine near the stairwell doors, and I drank every drop of it because sitting in that plastic chair with something warm in my hands was the only thing I could do. Wanda texted once at 11:09, 3 words, "How is she?" No question mark, no follow-up, 3 words, and then silence. Dr. Finley found me at 11:51. His face was measured, not alarmed, professionally serious. "The fracture is what we expected. Surgery tomorrow at 7:30. She's in good hands. Her heart is strong, her mind is sharp, and frankly, she's already argued with 2 of my nurses, which is an excellent sign." I almost smiled at that. "That's her." He nodded. "She's also asked whether the recovery wing stocks anything by Colm Toybean. I told her I'd find out." I actually laughed. "Yeah, that sounds exactly right." My mother was sitting up in her hospital bed when I was let back in, already in the process of deciding what she thought about the gown they'd given her, which I gathered from the look on her face was not a favorable verdict. "Sit down, Curtis," she said. I sat. She studied me for a moment with the particular attention she had always given to things she wanted to understand completely. She'd studied me that way when I was 17, and trying to pretend a bad situation was fine. She saw through it in about 4 seconds then, and she saw through it now. Wanda didn't come. It wasn't a question. She had a showing, an important one. My mother nodded slowly. She looked toward the window. The November light was coming through at an angle, pale and thin, the way Indiana light always gets in the late fall. It made the room feel smaller and more honest. "She's had important things every time, hasn't she?" she said quietly. I didn't answer. She looked back at me. She wasn't performing anything, wasn't angry, wasn't building toward something, just stating what was accurate. "Curtis, she wasn't at your father's memorial dinner. She left before the food was even put out. She said she wasn't feeling well. I remembered. When I had my knee replacement 3 years ago and you drove me to every single therapy session yourself, she came to the hospital once. For 35 minutes. Said the parking situation was too stressful. I remembered that too. I had explained it to myself in ways that made sense at the time. Last Thanksgiving when she drove to her sister's instead of coming here, and you sat at this table and had dinner with me and didn't say a word about it being just the two of us. You just cooked twice as much food and we watched the game, and you acted like it was exactly what you'd planned. My throat tightened. I had not let myself think about that one in a long time. I want to call Robert Aldridge in the morning, she said. Robert Aldridge had been my parents' attorney for 22 years, handled my father's estate, updated my mother's will 6 years ago. Precise, thorough, said exactly what he meant without ceremony. I kept my voice careful. Okay. I've been thinking, she said, for a while. I want to get certain things in order while I'm thinking clearly, and I have the time to do it right. Mom? The look she gave me closed that sentence before I finished it. Your father and I spent 42 years building something together. She folded her hands in her lap. Not because we wanted it to become anything grand, because we believed it should go somewhere it belonged. To someone who understood what it actually cost to build something with another person. The patience it takes. The showing up it takes. She paused. Wanda has never understood that. I want you to hear me when I say I'm not angry about it. I'm really not. I'm just finished pretending it isn't what it is. Every word landed the way long-held truths land when they're finally spoken out loud, slow and very heavy, and with the specific weight of something that has been true for a long time before anyone said so. I don't need you to do this, I said. I know you don't, she said. I'm doing it anyway because I have earned the right to decide where the things I built with my husband go, and I've decided. She picked up her library book, just like that. Robert Aldridge arrived at 11 the next morning, charcoal overcoat, worn leather briefcase, close-cropped silver hair. He shook my hand at the doorway and said, Your mother is one of the most precise thinkers I've worked with in 22 years of practice. I mean that as the highest compliment I know how to give a person. I stepped out while they talked. Some things belong to the people in the room having them. What I know is that Robert Aldridge was in that room for 49 minutes. When he came out, he shook my hand again and told me the amended documents would be filed by end of business the following day. The house on Sycamore Lane, paid off in 2014, the savings account representing 35 years of my mother's library salary, her pension, and 4 decades of careful joint decisions she and my father had made together. The silver and pearl earrings my father had given her on their 20th anniversary, which she had worn to every occasion that mattered since the day she'd opened that box. And the 1972 Chevrolet pickup my father had spent 3 years restoring in his garage, the one that still started clean and still smelled on warm mornings, faintly like him. Plus $12,000 for the Humane Society of Indianapolis on East Michigan Street, where my mother had volunteered every other Saturday for 8 years, because that was the kind of woman she was, the kind who showed up even when no one was tracking it. Wanda's name did not appear in any of it. You figure it out, someone had said. Turns out my mother had. The surgery the next morning went smoothly, 91 minutes. Dr. Finley came out to find me and Sherman, who had arrived at the hospital at 6:40 without a word of explanation and simply sat down beside me with 2 coffees from the place on Raymond Street that was the only decent cup within 4 miles. She did beautifully, Dr. Finley said. Strong heart. She tried to negotiate the anesthesia dosage, which I have never seen before, but we managed. Sherman let out a short laugh beside me. That's a hell of a woman. Yeah, I said, she really is. My phone had been going off since mid-morning. I looked at it for the first time in hours when I was back in the waiting room. 16 calls from Wanda between 10 and 2. I set the phone face down and didn't pick it up again. Brought my mother home 6 days later, to my house, not to Sycamore Lane. Her house wasn't set up for the walker she'd need, and I was not putting her back in it alone while she healed. She brought 2 bags, her crossword collection, 4 library books she'd requested through interlibrary loan before the surgery, and the firm opinion that hospital discharge paperwork was designed specifically to test a person's will to live. Wanda was in the living room when we came through the door. She stood up quickly. Edith, how are you feeling? My mother looked at her, the way my mother looked at things she had already settled in her mind, pleasantly, without any warmth behind it. Healing, she said. Thank you for asking. Then she told me she wanted to lie down, and I helped her to the guest room and closed the door quietly behind me. Wanda was in the kitchen when I came back, standing at the counter with her arms crossed and her face arranged in a way that told me she had been rehearsing whatever she was about to say. "I've been calling you," she said. "I know. Robert Aldridge's paralegal contacted me about changes to your mother's estate." I poured myself a glass of water, let the tap run a few extra seconds. "She's not going to reconsider," I said. "Curtis, if you just talk to her." "She didn't do it out of spite. I want you to understand that. She's not built that way. She did it because she paid attention for 13 years and she made a decision about what she saw. That's the whole story." The composure slipped once, just briefly, and underneath it was something real. Fear. The arriving too late kind. The kind that shows up when consequence finally catches up to choice. But it was the money she was afraid of losing, not me. And standing in that kitchen, with my mother asleep in the guest room down the hall and the November evening pressing dark against the windows, I felt something go loose in my chest. Not with a sound. Quietly. The way a line goes slack when you finally stop holding tension on both ends. I didn't say anything else. Wanda left the kitchen. I heard her on the stairs. I sat down at the table and I thought about my mother on that bathroom floor with her library book still in her hand, not calling me because she hadn't wanted to be a bother. I thought about Sherman backing out of his garage without pausing to think about whether he had the time. I thought about 35 years of library salary and 42 years of two people building something together because they believed what they built would mean something when it mattered. It mattered. I got up and walked to the guest room and knocked softly. "You don't need to check on me," my mother said. "I'm not checking on you," I said. "I'm sitting with you." A pause. "Bring the extra pillow from the hall closet. This one is flat." I brought the pillow. I sat in the chair by the window. She had her reading glasses on and her book open, and for a while we just sat there in the quiet, the way we had always sat together in quiet. Since I was small enough to sit beside her at the library reference desk after school, reading whatever I'd pulled off the shelf, not needing to fill the space with anything. "Curtis," she said without looking up. "Yeah, Mom?" "She's going to be upset for a while." "I know." She turned a page. "That's not your emergency anymore." I looked at her, at this small, steady, completely undefeated woman in my guest room, reading by lamplight like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "No," I said, "it's not." She nodded once and went back to her page. My phone was on the nightstand. 47 missed calls from Wanda by the time I finally picked it up. I looked at the number for a moment. Then I set the phone face down and didn't touch it again that night. I didn't make any decisions out loud that evening. Didn't make any phone calls. Didn't say anything final. But I already knew. The way you know something before you're ready to give it a name, in the part of yourself that has been watching clearly, even when you were trying very hard not to look too carefully. I had not spent 13 years building a marriage. I had spent 13 years building an argument that something was fine when it was not fine, and I had gotten so good at the argument that I had almost believed it myself. I understood the difference now. The house on Sycamore Lane was 30 minutes away in the dark. The truck my father had restored was under its canvas cover in the garage, exactly where it had always been. My mother was in the room down the hall, reading a library book and turning pages in the quiet like she had all the time in the world, because in the ways that mattered, she did. For the first time in a long time, I was not standing in my own life alone. That was enough. That was exactly enough.